Or I could put on one of my regional English accents. Well, in a ball, mate.
Now that's entertainment. Hello and welcome to the Rose and Rockstar from the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast and the Marketing Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, I am a CMO. It's Saturday the 3rd of May, and in a moment I'll join my chum and Chief Troublemaker of 7th Bear, Robert Rose, in our virtual bar, the Rose and Rockstar, where he recommends one of his fabulous cocktails and I pick his brains on a marketing topic that is top of mind for me. This week, I came across a prediction from Gartner that states that mass digital detoxing will force CMOs to spend 70% of their total marketing budgets on offline channels, a topic that definitely needed a chat over a cocktail. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
Race the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar.
Thank you, mate.
I'm going to continue to get more and more dramatic with that introduction. When I see you coming into the bar, it's like at some point I'll be like, Ian.
Yeah. We should do it like, or maybe I should change the music and the background noise, and it'd be like when Norm comes into the bar and cheers.
Yeah, that's right.
Norm.
That's right. Or I could put on one of my regional English accents. Well, in a ball, mate.
Now that's entertainment. See, there. That's what we need.
We'll just work our way through, the regional dialects of English accents.
Well, you do some really good impersonations, and I know that from your podcast, This Old Marketing. And you do. I'm not going to ask you to do any of them, but I know that you do a very good Sean Connery and stuff. So yeah, maybe there's something in that. We can just vary it up for the listener, and we'll have a different barman every week.
Yeah, there you go. The one that my wife and I do all the time is from 4 Weddings in a Funeral. You'll remember this. A great actor. I think he's passed away, actually. The guy who plays the boyfriend of the gay couple in 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and he's the one who has the heart attack in the middle of the movie.
Oh yeah.
And he says, he's walking down talking to one of American women, and he's like, I don't think I know him, but I could get his fax number for you. My wife and I always do that whenever we don't know the answer to a question. We go, well, I don't know, but I think I could get his fax number for you.
That's a classic. Yes, absolutely, man. That's what we should be doing. More of that and less of this marketing chat. But first, can we have a drink? What are we going to have?
We have a wonderful drink. This is I'm a big fan of Manhattans, and this is a sweet Manhattan cocktail for us tonight, which basically starts with a bourbon or a rye. I prefer bourbon for my Manhattans, but some people prefer rye, so either of those is fine. And then we have basically, if you've got 2 parts bourbon, then you go with 1 part Rosso vermouth, which is a sweet vermouth, and then you can go. If you want to if you've got a little jar of maraschino cherries, you can just pour this tiny little bit of the syrup from the jar of maraschino cherries into your cocktail there, and then add a little bitters, of course, with the classic Manhattan, and then you've got a sweet Manhattan, and then you can add a little twist of lemon or something for a garnish, and it's a lovely. It's sweet. And it doesn't ruin my rule of no sugars and stuff too much because it's you're basically just taking a little juice from the maraschino cherry jar and putting that in there, and it's a lovely drink.
Nice, sounds very nice. But and are the rye whiskey Manhattan people the same people who drink vodka martinis?
Yeah, indeed.
It's got to be bourbon. Yeah. It's got to be bourbon in your Manhattan. I think.
It's got to be bourbon. Yeah, they say. Yeah, that's right. But the rye whiskey is nice because then it doesn't have to come from Tennessee, and you've got tariffs and all that stuff. So
that's a good point. Yeah. For people that haven't stocked up on their bourbon that live outside the US, that's a good point.
That's right.
All right, my friend. I have a question for you.
Sure.
And this is something that. Not written by you, unlike last week. This is from Gartner, and the interesting. So I saw they've got a predictions podcast webinar going on, the top marketing predictions 2025, and it talks about AI as everything does. And in that webinar, they claim that and I've got to try and get this quote right. Mass digital detoxing will force CMOs to spend 70% of their total marketing budgets on offline channels to better engage consumers. And they say that that's going to happen by 2028, which isn't really very far away. So I was wondering what your take on this would be, because I would imagine that anybody who's thinking that, well, if 70% of our budget is going to be spent on offline channels in 2028, we ought to be thinking about it now. So two questions for you there, mate. Do you think that this is valid as a prediction? And the second thing is what do you recommend for us B2B marketers when we start thinking about offline?
This is rare for me, but I think Gartner nailed this one.
Wow.
I'm not sure it's going to be that far out. I think it could be short. Now, here's the thing. I'm not sure I buy. I mean, I know why they were sort of framed it as offline. I'm not sure it goes to offline as much as it does to offline and more traditional elements of digital, right? So call it manually created email, or even banner ads, or content, of course, content marketing, organic outreach, influencer marketing, all that kind of stuff I could see being part of this. It's just, I think digitally speaking, there's too much media that would be considered digital these days for brands to go completely into print and billboards, and that's it, right? I mean, so, or letters, direct mail. So I don't see it going completely offline, but I really like the prediction of how they framed this. Did it say who there at Gartner made the prediction?
It was. I think you'd need to perhaps get through their various paywalls, but it just had the highlight of the banner of that's what they're predicting. As part of that webinar.
So Chris Ross over there, who runs the CMO practice, is one of the few real analysts who totally get it, right? Who I think really, really is a blue flame thinker when it comes to marketing and strategy and all of that. And so I would not be surprised if that quote is somehow associated with him, his team, or whatever's going on there. In any event, I think it's, so when I think about this, you can already see at the practitioner level some of this pushback starting to happen. And this is especially true for the content people, et cetera, that are looking at, and a lot of this, honestly, is similar to the pushback that we got in the early days of marketing automation. In the early days of marketing automation, people were just bad at it, right? I mean, and so and not by any fault of their own, they just didn't. There was no experience, right? There was nobody. Nobody had done it before. I remember very distinctly in the early days of Eloqua and, Marketo and some of the more sophisticated, true marketing automation systems that could push emails and text messages and, push all this stuff, which was out there. And ostensibly, most brands were using those tools as spam guns, right? They were just basically, spamming everybody with email. They were just basically big spam email guns. And there was a pushback on marketing automation as it's like, it's not working, right? And so in many ways, the idea of inbound as a separate, and content and landing pages and thought leadership and all that was in direct response to the inefficiency and misunderstanding of how marketing automation and drip, was supposed to work in the early days, very early days. I'm talking 2006, 2007, because that was all there, right? And you can pile onto that and go, even content management, web content management, both, the alma mater for both you and I, was largely misunderstood, and there was big pushback on web content management as a complex idea because most people just wanted to use it as a giant FTP tool, right? Just push out more content and web pages out to the website, but not really get into things like personalization and sort of those things. And there was a real simplicity pushback. And I think we could see something happening here in AI, which is, the promise of all these tools seems really interesting, but the misuse, and I don't mean misuse meaning there's a conscious sort of misuse. I mean a misuse in the sense that it's just, it's easy to say that you've got agentic AI that's going to do all these things and you're going to basically manage a bunch of agents to do this and integrate there and pull it all together. And you're just going to be able to explain a marketing campaign to an AI agent. It's all going to be handled in the background. It's like, but none of that's going to be true. It's all going to be sort of, you got to go configure this and you got to lightly code that and you got to no code that and you got to go in this and you got to set up that integration. You got to do this. And it's going to be a complex set of wires that need to get pulled together to make all this stuff happen. And marketers are just loath to get into that. And I think there's going to be a real pushback here. Not to mention, there may be really interesting ceilings that may be reached in terms of content quality and all of that. We're already starting to see AI hallucinating more because of the fact that AI content is learning from other AI content. And so you're starting to see a lot more hallucinations now. And that's a problem that nobody has any good answers for yet.
No, absolutely. So, but when they're referring to, and I did check the webinar page, and it isn't Chris Ross who was hosting the webinar, but I'm guessing this probably comes from his team. But the do you think this idea of mass digital detoxing? Do you think that's on the side of the consumer? They're probably talking about B2C, and we're more certainly on the show and focus more on B2B. But do you think people are just going to pull back from consuming content because we're going to get overwhelmed by this same old
I think it certainly could.
AI?
I think it certainly could go that way.
I
don't know that it will go that way, but I think it certainly could go that way if, there's all these things floating around now, the dead internet theory and, and content, is just becoming AI slop. And, there's a lot of that could push people to ultimately go, you know what, I'm just going to get my print newspaper or my print magazine or, or I'm going to go completely offline because I just don't trust this interface anymore. It's hard for me to get my head wrapped around that because of how prevalent digital media really is. And what I see happening more and more is sort of the, it's not the right word these days because of the obvious, but the tribalization of media platforms is becoming, in the short term, I see that becoming more of the issue, right? Where content across platforms becomes more identity based than anything else. And so everything has its identity, right? LinkedIn has an identity. Fox News has an identity. MSNBC has an identity. The New York Times has an identity. And you go get your identity-based content independent of the actual topics, right? It could be politics, news, business, marketing, whatever. You have an identity-focused channel for where you consume that, which basically creates confirmation bias and all kinds of things, of living in that vacuum. That to me is the bigger risk in the short term, where things become so siloed that, and I recently wrote about this as well, where it's like, now you can't, if you're a marketer, B2B especially, but if you're a marketer, there's no such thing as general brand messaging anymore, right? You have to develop targeted stories toward specific channels and the identity of those channels to tell your story. So you're not trying to, in other words, build one audience. What you're trying to do is stitch together many. And the more that you can create that common fabric between the various identities that you have to sort of assume to get in, to earn your way into the resonance of that particular community or that particular channel, that's the talent of marketing these days, is to somehow position a common story in such a way that a niche identity-focused audience is going to resonate with it. And then you stitch those together as best you can.
Yeah, I also think that private communities, to your point about trust, will become more prevalent as well, because, as we start to get overwhelmed by the open social media channels, and I'm seeing a lot more gated and paid communities that people are creating around themselves or around their brand or around, their community. So, for example, I'm in the, I was having a look at the Exit 5 community. I've been in that for a little while. And I think the challenge for marketers will be to break into those communities. And I think a lot of those communities you need to be invited into, right? You can't just pitch up and throw up like you can on LinkedIn and these fucking DMs that we get, which sell to us immediately. You connect. You're going to need to get invited into those communities, aren't you?
I think that's exactly right. You know what I mean? And so it's the next stage of what I was just talking about, right? Which is you've got the public media becoming more gated communities, really more than anything else. And then you have sort of the next logical step, which is actual gated communities themselves, whether they're paid or just gated, private gated communities, where as a brand, you have to, in either case, you have to earn your way in, right?
Yeah.
In other words, if you take a Ben and Jerry's general messaging to Fox News, you're not going to earn your way into that. You're not going to, you're not going to earn your way into that. You've got to figure out a way to position yourself so that you can resonate with that community, or you choose not to identify with it at all, and you go, okay, I'm going to purposely avoid that community.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I also think that the idea that CMO is going to move 70% of their total marketing budget to offline channels. This is a cold, hard commercial decision. It suggests to me that we'll no longer be able to cut through on the generic digital channels, and the only way to cut through will be to maybe go back to some of the basics that you're saying about that we were just talking about these sort of offline things. And that's I've heard people say direct mail is where it's at. They're getting much better response, and that's now people are saying that kind of thing. And maybe we should put stuff in the post.
Yeah. Print is truly driving a lot of value because it's really an alternative messaging, right? I mean, and I think that's probably one of the heart messages of what Gartner is trying to say there with that prediction. And so I love, here's what I'll say is I love the boldness of the prediction, and I love and I generally agree with it. And so it's sort of like, okay, let's, I think they're onto something for sure.
Yeah, well, I think your buddy Joe Polizzi would be jolly happy to hear about the print being back, wouldn't he? So, and mentioning Joe, where might I'll do it slightly differently. Where might people hear you and Joe Polizzi chatting?
well, you'll hear us on this stupid little podcast that we manage for the last 12 years now, if you can believe that, called This Old Marketing. And you can get that at thisoldmarketing.com.
Splendid. And if people are not going through a mass digital detox and want to read something decent on this interwebs, where might they find that?
That would be on our little slow-moving website. That also basically is it might as well be a print magazine with how often we update it. Oh dear, what did he just do there? It's called seventhbear.com.
Splendid. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you, man?
They'll find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm hanging out these days.
And back to the offline, will you be in the bar next week?
Of course, yeah. Let's make some cocktails for sure.
I look forward to it, man. I'll see you then. Thank you, Robert. What do you think? Are you changing the way you market? Maybe adding a bit of offline or getting more involved in private communities? I'd love to know what you think of this topic. Drop me an email. I'm ian@rockstarcmo.com. So that's a wrap on our visit to the Rose and Rockstar. Thank you for joining us. If you're not already connected, you can find links to me and Robert, plus links to all the things we discussed in the show notes at rockstarcmo.com, where you can also find links to our newsletter, blog, previous episodes, and all the things. Coming up this week on Rockstar CMO FM, on Wednesday, Kathy makes her monthly visit and she'll be sharing her take on the topic of the first 90 days for a marketing leader. Plus, I'll be presenting a webinar with marketing profs on Friday. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. In the meantime, just remember, as Judy Finn said in the film The School of Rock, you can't just say it, man. You've got to feel it in your blood and guts if you want to rock.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkinsporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.